A recent poll about the ongoing debt ceiling drama offers some mildly good news for President Biden and the Democrats, while revealing something more disturbing about the media's reporting. Intrigued? Then click that like and subscribe, and enjoy the video. Now, as most of you watching probably know, hopefully because you've been watching this channel, there's an ongoing drama about the debt ceiling between President Biden and House Republicans in particular. Now, again, as a reminder, the debt ceiling is effectively the self-imposed limit to how much the U.S. Treasury can borrow to pay outstanding and current debts. It has absolutely nothing to do with future spending or anything else. This is about bills and debts we've already agreed to pay. The debt ceiling has to be raised or suspended all the damn time. Since 1960, it's been raised or suspended like 70 times, literally. So it's nothing new. It's relatively common. As a matter of fact, it was raised 3 times or suspended 3 times under the Trump administration. So again, nothing new. But right now, House Republicans, particularly the MAGA contingent, have refused to commit to a debt ceiling suspension or raising or abolition, because we could technically abolish it, and it's probably a good idea since most other developed nations don't have one of their own. And if we don't raise or suspend the debt ceiling, then America will default on its debt around June 1st. And if we default on our debt, if we can't pay our bills, then that will trigger a massive, unprecedented domestic and international economic catastrophe. So it's basically House Republicans trying to play chicken with President Biden. So that's the background for it. Well, the Washington Post and ABC did a poll about how the public is reacting to this, and it offers some mildly good news for the president and the Democrats, and it's basically this. The poll finds that 39% of Americans say that they would blame Republicans in Congress if the government goes into default, while 36% said that they would blame President Biden, and 16% volunteered that they would blame both equally. So slightly more of Americans would blame congressional Republicans, as they should, compared to the president. Now, the numbers are close enough that President Biden and Democrats have to manage this PR very carefully, very proactively. But right now, the environment is is in their favor, somewhat. They have to be careful. And obviously, as you can probably expect, opinions vary based on partisanship. The same percentage of Democrats who would blame Republicans, well, the same number of Republicans would blame President Biden. It's just that more independents would blame Republicans in Congress. And again, as they should, because Republicans have actually raised the debt ceiling nearly twice as many times since 1960 under their administration compared to Democrats. So when it comes to raising or suspending the debt ceiling, Republicans do it more often, substantially more often. And under the Trump administration, they wanted to raise the debt ceiling or suspend it 3 times without any conditions. And they were granted their wish, because even Democrats understood playing chicken with the debt ceiling is really, really dangerous. But Republicans don't abide by that ethic. They don't abide by that standard. They want Democrats, when it's convenient for Republicans. Republicans want Democrats to just raise it. Hey, guys, don't try to play chicken with us. Don't make demands. It's really dangerous. It's irresponsible. Even Donald Trump has said that. Just we got to raise it. We got to raise it. But when Democrats are in power, Republicans operate by a different standard because, of course, they're bad faith hypocrites. But here's what's interesting. Throughout this article and throughout this poll, this is the Washington Post, mind you, okay, which is considered by many people, even though it's owned by billionaire Jeff Bezos, to be a liberal outlet now, a part of the liberal mainstream media. The frustrating thing about this article is at no point does it mention the fact that the debt ceiling has been raised 70 times or so since 1960, and 50 of those times have been raised by Republicans. This article doesn't mention the fact that every time we have come close to a debt ceiling crisis or a government shutdown or anything like that, it's been because of Republicans. We saw this begin under the speakership of Newt Gingrich during the Clinton administration. Prior to that, it was basically understood. Even President Reagan said, you don't play games with the debt ceiling. If the debt ceiling needs to be raised, you raise it. Republican or Democrat, you raise it. Newt Gingrich came and changed the game, right? He was basically Mitch McConnell 1.0. He was like, no, we need to get dirtier. We need to fight dirtier. We need to be brutaler. We need to operate by double standards if it benefits us. And so he played chicken with the debt ceiling and the government budget with President Clinton, right? He was willing to risk government shutdowns and things like that. Then we saw Republicans continue to escalate that tactic. Under the Obama administration, congressional Republicans refused to raise the debt ceiling in 2011, 2012, 2013, in that area, unless President Obama agreed to spending cuts. Like, hey, we're going to risk defaulting on our loans, plunging the economy, Republican voters, Democratic voters, the rich, the poor, everybody into just absolute economic catastrophe unless you agree to do what we want. And by the time they came to a deal, because of course, unfortunately, President Obama, God love him, blinked, we actually suffered for like the first time in U.S. history a lowering of our national credit score. Crediting agencies lowered the previously unimpeachable credit score of the United States, which cost hundreds of billions of dollars in borrowing fees because we were no longer quite as trusted in terms of our financial security. So if we wanted to borrow from anybody else, we had to pay more to do it. And now we have the situation with President Biden, which we actually had last year as well. Republicans didn't want to play ball in raising the debt ceiling, even though, as was the case last year, as is the case this year, 90% of the debt that the debt ceiling would be raised to accommodate accrued under the Trump administration. Republicans are refusing to raise the debt ceiling to pay for debt accrued under their guy, just like last year. It has nothing to do with current spending. People can say whatever they want about President Biden's spending, but that's not going to be a problem for us until in the future, right? We won't have to raise the debt ceiling to accommodate President Biden's spending until the future. Right now, it's Trump's bills. It's Republican bills that Republicans are refusing to pay for without concession. I hope President Biden doesn't negotiate. I hope he says, listen, you all set the ethic. And he can quote Reagan, he can quote Trump, he can quote probably 10,000 Republicans about how you don't play games with the debt ceiling. This is a bipartisan issue. This is a bipartisan obligation. Do it. I hope he doesn't let them hold him hostage, because the thing about the Republican Party is they show no limiting principle. And I hope he makes it clear and puts the pressure on Republicans by leveraging the slightly advantageous public climate that this is Republicans' fault. It's 100% Republicans' fault. Democrats are completely blameless in the situation. And I know that's probably going to piss a lot of conservatives off, but it's true. Republicans are absolutely 100% the villains in this particular story. And the facts don't care about your feelings. It's simply the case. So hopefully President Biden will navigate this media landscape very well. And the other thing, again, I'll just point out, it's frustrating that the so-called mainstream or liberal media, which is supposed to give Democrats a passing grade on everything, they actually grade Republicans on a curve. They don't mention the pertinent, relevant facts that the only brinkmanship and bad faith on the debt ceiling has ever come from the Republican Party. They don't mention that the Republican Party has tried to raise or suspend the debt ceiling nearly twice as often as Democrats. Those are pertinent facts which are relevant, but the media doesn't want to be seen as liberal or biased, and so they omit that stuff. So anyway, it's kind of a frustrating story, but there's some optimism here as well. So again, hopefully President Biden and the Democrats play their cards well.